Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. One night on Friday, August the 20th, 1976, 4 art students in their early 20s from Boston, Massachusetts, left the city to go on a camping and canoeing trip to Northern Maine. The 4 young men were twins Jack and Jim Weiner and their friends Charlie Foltz and Chuck Ratt. The men arrived at a location where they had pre-booked an airplane that would fly them along with their canoes and camping gear to Telos Lake on the Allagash Waterways, where they stayed for a few days. On the night of Tuesday, August the 24th, the men, along with other campers, were looking up at the sky and could see a bright object that stood out amongst the stars in a clear black sky. Jim took out his binoculars to get a closer look at the object, which at that stage was only a few miles away and was hovering over some treetops. It continued to hover for a few seconds until the light slowly started to fade from the outside to the centre. The group of campers thought nothing more about it and continued with their activities. 2 days later, on Thursday the 26th of August, the young men moved to a quieter spot on Eagle Lake, and that night decided to go trout fishing. The area they had chosen to camp was pitch black, so in order to mark their location they decided to build a huge campfire. As they were sitting in the boat, Chuck had the strange feeling that they were being watched and looked around. As he turned his head, he could see a large bright sphere of coloured light hovering about 300 feet in the sky. It was motionless and never made a sound. Chuck called out to the other men to turn around, and then rising above the trees was a huge glowing object. As their eyes slowly adapted to the intensity of the light, they could see what looked like energy flowing around it. It then changed colour, where the object seemed to have a plasmatic motion to it. Charlie grabbed the flashlight and flashed the object, and in an instant it came to an abrupt halt and started to slowly approach their canoe. And then a tube-shaped beam of light shot out from the object and hit the water. A glowing ring reflected on the water, which appeared hollow, and the beam slowly made its way to their canoe. Now terrified, the young men started to paddle frantically towards their campfire, but the beam of light swept across the lake and engulfed them. From that moment on, each of the men had a different version of what happened next. Charlie remembers paddling to the shore and finding himself at the campsite. Chuck remembers staying in the canoe after the other men jumped out in a panic and continued to stare at the object. Jack had a terrified feeling they would not escape from the beam of light, but in the next moment had reached the shore and got out of the canoe and looked at the object that was about 30 feet above the water and continued to hover in total silence. Then the beam of light shone directly up into the sky and disappeared in a flash. His brother Jim remembers standing on the shore observing the beam of light as it hovered before instantly disappearing. They were all in a state of shock, not moving or talking. After the paralysing fear wore off, Chuck got out of the canoe and joined the others on the beach. What shocked them was the state of the fire. When they'd left to go fishing, they'd put huge logs on the fire that should have burned for many hours, but the fire was now reduced to burning embers. From the moment they left a huge blazing fire on the shore to a heap of red coals, they had no conscious memory of the time between. A few years later, Jim Weiner suffered a head injury, leaving him with epilepsy. Whilst having treatment, the specialist asked him whether he'd been suffering from sleep disorders. Well, Jim was too embarrassed to mention that he'd been experiencing unusual visitations, where he would be paralysed as strange creatures probed him in his bedroom. The young men then attended a speech in Waltham, Massachusetts, given by Raymond E. Fowler, who was best known for his UAP investigations that focused on sightings and close encounters in New England. After the speech, Jim and his friends approached Fowler, who was fascinated by the fact that there were multiple witnesses to an unusual event, and in 1989 initiated a formal investigation. The investigation team consisted of David Webb from MUFON and professional hypnotist Anthony Constantino. The men were all interviewed and were all checked for character backgrounds with their friends, neighbours and employees. They also spoke to the chief forest ranger, who had initially received their reports. They examined their maps and notes about their camping trip, along with the astronomical and weather data against what they had reported. Everything pointed to the fact that the men were telling the truth and the events were accurate. The next step was to find out what had happened to the young men and the missing time. All of this was done through a series of hypnotic regression sessions. Under hypnosis, the young men were able to recall detailed and traumatic events that they had endured during the missing time that they could not account for. They all described being transferred one by one into a beam of light and found themselves on board a craft. There they encountered humanoid-like beings that were able to exert some type of mind control which they had no control over. They were then made to undress and sit on plastic-type seats. One by one, they were taken from the bench and given physical examinations. This procedure consisted looking at their eyes and mouths using a long rod with a light at the end. They were then placed in a harness and made to flex their arms and legs. They were then made to lie on a table where they were examined by handheld and large machine-like instruments that were placed over their bodies. The strange beings then took samples of saliva, scrapings of skin, blood, feces, urine and sperm. After this, they were made to dress and entered into another room that had a portal on its wall. They were each made to walk through the portal where they felt strange sensations as they floated through the beam of light and back into the canoe, which was now moored in shallow waters near their campsite. The tube of light appeared to hold the canoe in place as each of them was placed inside and seated in the same place before being abducted. Under hypnosis, it was discovered that the twins had been visited by strange beings since childhood, where their parents attributed the visitations to ghosts, and the thought that they were associated with UAPs had not entered their minds. Jack was now married, and during further investigations found that he and his wife Mary had been abducted from the remote mountain retreat in Townsend, Vermont. It happened on the night of May the 20th, 1988, when Jack's dog woke up wanting to go outside to the toilet. As he walked into the kitchen, he saw a blue light shining through the window. He went outside for a closer look and saw a glowing object in a nearby field. He remembered bringing the dog back inside, and in the morning believed he had dreamt everything. However, under hypnosis, he described in detail being abducted along with his wife. His wife remembered dreaming about deer with huge eyes appearing at the bedside and staring at them. However, Mary did not respond well to hypnosis, and when describing the strange deer, would immediately bring herself out of hypnosis. Jack and Mary then appeared in front of a huge glowing object that would change colour from white to yellow to orange to purple, then back to white. The object was silent, and there was an acrid ozone smell in the air. They were then made to walk through the blue light unto the object and suddenly appeared inside the glowing craft. They were then separated, and Jack underwent a series of examinations similar to the ones 12 years previously. The couple were then reunited and floated back across the field from the craft to their house, and then through the closed front door to their beds. This experience left burns on the bottom of Jack's feet, and he also received scars above his ankle from previous abductions. All in all, 5 people were abducted and quite possibly could still be receiving visitations. Why and for what purpose?